Well, hey everybody, my name's Scott, and this is Nathan, and believe it or not, we are about to wrap up the book by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score. And in this session, we're going to look at the final chapter, which is chapter 20, and then there is a brief epilogue, which we'll discuss as well. So, Nathan, this final chapter is an interesting one to me. And again, I can't say I have a lot of experience with this, but it's called Finding Your Voice, Communal Rhythms and Theater. So what in the world does that have to do with trauma and recovery?
Yeah. Well, first, I was surprised, but I'm also thrilled that theater is one of the modalities that he uses. And after reading through the chapter, I can totally understand why it is included. There's a few places where a woman named Tina Packer is sharing about trauma and theater. And she opens up this chapter by saying, acting is not about putting on a character, but discovering the character within you. You are the character. You just have to find it within yourself, albeit a very expanded version of herself. And by that, she is basically saying society teaches us to typically hide our emotions, to cover over trauma, to not live fully in the present of a trauma experience. And in acting, in order to be a good actor, she says you have to do the opposite. If you want an audience to connect fully with a character, you need to be actually fully embodied in your acting. That's the most way that people can tell that when you are happy and it's like for real, the audience can feel that too. When you're acknowledging that you're feeling hurt and you're showing that to the audience, then that gives the audience permission to do so as well. So you actually need to do the opposite from what society says. And it goes on to say how much we feel in control, the sense of agency that you'd mentioned in the last chapter, which is defined by our relationship with our body and its rhythm. This is basically saying we have to be in our bodies. So think of it this way. Someone, I'll give you the example I shared. Someone who has experienced either sexual or physical abuse in childhood can enter a storyline where the character has experienced the same thing. On one hand, that the person who has really experienced it can remain anonymous, meaning you're not sure if they really did have that experience. So that means the person who is playing that character can feel safe to fully act out the experience, acknowledging what's happened, and revealing in their body and emotions what is real about that event, meaning it wasn't their fault. It was a tragic event. It was worth grieving about. It wasn't shame on you, but it was somebody else's mistake, which is not usually what people will experience in real life. They will think, oh, maybe that was my fault. Maybe I did something wrong. I am unlovable. I'm a piece of trash anyway. But in the story, meaning in the theater, they can actually reveal the fullness of that event the way it should be played out. And that in turn will help the audience fully connect with the character. So that means the person who has trauma, for them to do a good job means that they need to get in touch with what's going on the inside. And that's why they use therapy or theater in therapy, which I thought was a fantastic way of kind of talking about trauma without actually forcing people to talk about their own. And they used, a lot of historical things like Shakespeare, because let's face it, a lot of the Shakespeare and older dramas is full of heartache and betrayal and death and just
Right.
destructive behavior. And so there's plenty of material there to give people a character and a scene that will directly cause them to reflect for themselves on what they went through in order to be a good actor, a good contributor to the play or to the theater.
That's right. One of the things he also said in this chapter was that trauma to the victim often feels God-forsaken. They feel completely isolated.
Yeah.
They feel alone. Nobody else
Yeah.
could possibly understand what they're feeling. And he has learned that theater is inherently communal. Like you don't generally act to a non-audience. You act to an audience,
right?
And you're acting with other actors and actresses, and so there's the sense of community with the other actors and actresses, as well as the audience. And to broaden that, you and I work with Celebrate Recovery, and we know that recovery most effectively happens in community.
Right.
Which, of course, is what the scriptures teach us.
And the biggest element is the collective singing, of course, in the beginning. And they address that too. It's not just theater, but it is communal acts. They talk about theater, they talk about art, singing, they even talk about sports. And when you're in a role that's supposed to be collaborative, even when you're singing at CR, it's supposed to be collaborative. You're supposed to add your voice to everyone else's. They say it's supposed to add courage and hope to the mix, that you are seeing that togetherness, you're moving towards a positive outcome.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So it is, he also calls it trauma drama. So it has a lot of potential, and he's seen it work firsthand. And he also calls it therapeutic theater, where the trauma survivors become the actors. Okay.
Yeah.
So then from there,
so those are the methods.
Sorry?
I said, so those are the methods to recovery that he does.
Yes.
I mean, there's quite a few of them. Very fascinating.
That's right. Excellent. And then that leads us to his epilogue. And one of the sayings that he mentions, which we are very familiar with, is what?
Hurt people hurt people. I highlighted it in here.
Yeah.
He actually adds to it. He does say trauma breeds further trauma, which is in the same line as hurt people, meaning people who've had trauma often cause other people to have trauma too, you know?
That's right.
So
we all affect each other. And he gives some of his personal experiences that with all the research that's in this book, all that's been learned, and at this point of our recording, this book, I think, is even several years old. But he says with all that we've learned, there's still so much trauma happening in our world. And so I really like how he, at his trauma center, it sounds like with his staff, one of the things they do that really impressed me is they go into schools, in schools where there might be a higher amount of trauma occurring in homes, and they, without even using the word trauma, they teach teachers how to teach students. And it's all these basic things that we tend to come back to, whether it's deep breathing, teaching people to feel what their body is feeling, questions like, well, what does that feel like? What does anger feel like? What does sadness feel like? Where do you feel that in your body? Basically teaching teachers very easy ways, simple ways to teach students how they can slow down their limbic system and become fully agents of who they are. It's really,
right.
I love the work that they're doing. And he
And
ends.
it's so
How
needed.
about how he ends?
Yeah. I mean, he goes a lot into children specifically, because he just feels like if we are just able to help children overcome trauma and crisis in their life, it will ultimately help the society have healing. Because again, if you can prevent hurt adults from hurting children, then you're trying to stop the cycle itself. So he has a lot of strong feelings about making sure children have parents that are creating a safe and loving home, teachers that know how to create safe and loving spaces at school, doing communal activities like the theater and singing, as all part of goals to really help society move away from just being trauma based. And how does he end, right?
Yeah, with this jarring statement: trauma is our most urgent public health issue.
Yeah.
And think about that.
Yeah.
Trauma is our
I
most
also
urgent public
highlighted
health issue.
I highlighted this because I felt like it was a good summary at the end. He literally says, the body keeps the score, colon, if trauma is encoded in heartbreaking and gut-wrenching sensations. Our first priority is to help people move out of fight or flight states, reorganize their perception of danger, and manage relationships. Basically saying so many people are in fight or flight states, and it's causing major damage to relationships, whether it's at home or in office or wherever. And I think that's the basis of trauma is our most urgent public health crisis, because it's, he does talk about the money put into different healing systems and social systems that are basically for people who have just had so much trauma in their life that they cannot function, not as an American, just as a healthy human being.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, we hope this overview after these many sessions, it's quite a book, that's for sure, have been helpful to you. I know that community has been one of the common being open and honest about your life. It's been one of the common themes. We do try and practice that at Celebrate Recovery. We meet most Monday nights at 7 o'clock at Christ Community Church. Love to have you join us on any given Monday night. You are always welcome there.
Yeah.
And we will join you again with a new book, and we look forward to seeing you there. Take care.
All right, guys.